But otherwise, we're recording and it will be put online later for you to view at your pleasure. So without further ado, I'd like to hand it off to one of our speakers to introduce themselves, and maybe we'll start with Sandy Jacobson to introduce herself and give us a little bit about her.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, everyone. My name is Sandy Jacobson, and I'm the Vice President for a company called Richardson Executive Search. I've been in the executive search and staffing industry probably for over 15 years. And prior to that, come from a background in fund development at the University of Alberta. And I've worked a lot in disability organizations too as well. I sit on the board for the Paralympic Sport Association, and also I'm in the Chamber of Commerce on the board of directors too as well. Local to Edmonton, I've worked in politics. I've worked for the government. I've worked for big public companies, private companies, not-for-profits. So I certainly love being in my industry right now to support, again, alumni like yourself and former job searchers or potentially clients later on down the road to navigate, in terms of recruiting top talent and how we can help.
Great, thanks, Sandy. I'll hand it off to Blake to introduce himself here.
For sure. Thank you, Ryan. So I'm Blake Novak. I'm an alumni of Concordia myself. I graduated in 2015. And while I was there, I was president of the Concordia Business Association, and at the same time was on the board for organizations such as NACHA, the Northern Alberta Cooperative Housing Association, and other organizations there. Myself, I'm a human resources generalist for JTech Electrical, and my career since Concordia has been primarily in recruitment and HR relating to the construction industry. So everything from power line technicians to in-home technicians for internet installs to heavy equipment operators, as well as everything related to the corporate side of that as well. So, yeah.
Thank you, Blake. And then last but not least, I'll hand it off to Shannon here to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Shannon Coyne, and I'm the Career Services Advisor at Concordia, University of Edmonton. So I do recognize a couple of the students who are joining us today. Hi, welcome. My background is not in human resources, rather it's in career development. So I'll be approaching the questions that Ryan will ask today from a career development lens. My experience has been 3 years in student recruitment, engagement, and career spaces. And I'm very passionate about applying coaching and strengths-based advising into my work with students and alumni.
Great, thanks, Shannon. So just a quick overview of what we're going to do here is I'm going to throw some questions towards the panel, and they'll answer them from their different and unique perspectives. And I think it's something important to keep in mind is that there are different perspectives and they may be coming at it from different angles. So there isn't always one right answer or one best approach. So I think that's a good way to approach this, and just keep that in mind when you're hearing the different answers from our panelists today. So I'll throw some questions to our panelists. We'll probably aim to take some questions, if there are any, with about maybe 10 or 5 minutes left. So we'll be kind of trying to keep a little bit of track of time here, especially because we started a little bit late, but just to keep everybody's, be conscious and cognizant of everyone's time. So I'm going to get right into it with our first question, which is, what do you see as the different phases of an effective job search? And maybe I'll throw that off to Sandy to get us started here.
Okay, wonderful. Well, I guess effective phases of the job search, it would be probably, we always say that there's two types of candidates. There's active that either are not working or currently very actively looking, or there's a passive market, which is probably people that are still working, would love to maybe make a career change, but really haven't had time to look or don't really know how to navigate, the waters moving forward. So, that's the big thing. Once people sort of decide that I'm ready for a change, whether I'm working in a toxic environment or just ready for a career growth or move, that's the big kind of change right there. There's kind of the awareness once you made that decision, and that's where typically people will kind of engage with ourselves, whether it's, on the professional staffing or executive search side. And usually at that point, I like to be able to kind of drill down further around, okay, so if you're actively looking or thinking about a move, have you applied anywhere, right? Do you have a resume? At that point, we need to dust up your LinkedIn profile, right? You want to make sure there's no typos. Get connected, get your network kind of, engaged. Get an Excel spreadsheet around, again, companies you're going to maybe target to make sure you're not duplicating, and you've got, somebody asks, hey, have you applied somewhere before? You can say, yes, I've applied to these 5 companies, and keep an active list. So, that's sort of some of the advice we kind of start to engage. If somebody says, I'm looking for a career change and I don't know what I want to do, for us as sort of search professionals, we've got to drill down further to say, you know what, we need to have a clear kind of pathway. And maybe at that point, you need to go to a company like BGS Enterprises and do some career laddering, or you need to have a bit more information around what you're looking for so that we can support that search and move forward. There's never any fee incurred at all for anybody looking when they kind of register with a company like Richardson, or it could be Executrade or another firm. So we're here to support your search. Can never guarantee that we can kind of fill or find you that right match, but we'll do our best to be able to support you, hopefully do an interview, prep you, give you some of the tools when you go out into the workforce too that you have looking for jobs. Again, there's an 80-20% rule. I mean, right now, the frustration is with a lot of candidates looking, whether you're maybe not working or actively looking, is everyone is looking for work. Or so you put an ad up. We can put an ad up, let's say on our site or through LinkedIn, and we'll get 400 resumes within about 3 days. So the volume is very, very high. So sometimes the frustration is too, when you're looking, you don't get a response back. It's all web-based. Did they receive my resume? And there's a lot of frustration when you're looking, again. So that's where we kind of come into play too, to be able to try to be a bit more coaching, with our candidates too, to say, you know what, if let's say you're kind of applying, you're not getting any traction. Why? Is it a skill set? Is it maybe your resume that's not getting the traction? So having those conversations moving forward. So again, you have to have some patience. You have to be, you have to look at kind of how you can kind of stand on top of the pile or in the field when you're looking. So again, it's just helping navigate some of those waters.
Thanks, Sandy. I think that's some good context there. Blake, some thoughts on sort of the phases of job search and some of the themes maybe that Sandy touched on there?
Yeah, I just want to start, Sandy, and just say, like, when you were talking, I just wanted to say preach, because all of that is very, very true, especially the point of like the 80-20 rule. Don't let a job posting stop you when you've got 80% of the qualifications and 20% you may or may not have. Mainly because, I'll be honest, as an HR, someone working in HR, I'm the one who wrote that job description. Doesn't mean I know what's actually going on in that job 100%. So your skill set, your mentality, your attitude might be more than enough than just what the job description says. So yeah, don't let that phase you. In terms of the kind of phases that I identified, so myself, I'm actually a recent kind of exit of the COVID job search group. And so I was laid off in May and had been looking since then for a new organization, and had since the day I was laid off until September 24th, hundreds of resumes went out. I've gone through, 25 interviews. And Sandy, again, going back to your point, make sure that you're tracking all of this on a spreadsheet, at what stage you are, if you're being pre-screened, interviewed, second interviewed, every one of those. But yeah, those phases I would say would be: one, you're starting with the search. So you're going to look at LinkedIn, Indeed, Glassdoor, all the different areas of where jobs are posted. Then you're going to, once you've applied for a job, make sure that you research it. Well, even before then, understanding what the company is, because you don't want to join an organization and your values don't align, and that you don't, you can't see yourself in that organization before you even go for an interview. So that's a really important one. Of course, yes, and prep your resume and cover letter. Make sure the application's done. And then typically what I see and what I've done in my recruitment career is you'll have a pre-screen, typically 1 or 2 interviews. And depending on the role, you may get a third interview with higher up individuals. And then a reference check will occur, and then an offer would be extended. And that's a typical process. But again, like Sandy's saying, it's right now, one posting can have 400. For example, a labor position I just put out, which is unskilled, no requirements there, I had 675 applicants within 2 days. So it's a very robust job market right now. So don't let it discourage you if you don't get a response right away.
Some great pieces of advice there. Shannon, would you like to build on some of the thoughts there?
Sure. I think Blake and Sandy covered it really well. One aspect I think I would like to build on a little bit is just the importance of self-exploration as a part of your job search, especially when you are recent graduates and you're looking for your first full-time job outside of school. I think the self-exploration part is really crucial so that you're not applying to jobs that aren't a good fit for you, like Blake said, and that you're really putting your effort into positions that you are passionate about and that you think that you could do a really great job in. So having an understanding not only of the organization, which is really important, but also of what your value add is, I think is really crucial and can be a really key motivator when you're going through a process that can be really emotionally draining.
Yeah, I think that's a great point about having patience and some self-care in there, some mindfulness. I think we talked a little bit about some of the impacts of COVID and coronavirus. So feel free to add any other thoughts on that that you're thinking about. But I also thought I'd ask about what are some underutilized activities and resources for that job search piece that maybe a lot of especially new grads don't know to access or use or do. I think I'll throw it to Blake first for this one, and then.
For sure. I can tell you from the recruiters, well, in my role in recruiter side, some little things that can go a long way in terms of making our lives easier for the recruitment process. Number one, I know it sounds silly, but make sure your resume is sent in a PDF format. It sounds like no big deal to send it in Word or whatever, but documents in PDF can't be changed easily, and also they can be viewed on any platform. So depending on what organization you're going in, some may be using tablets, some might be looking on their phones, all that kind of stuff. And so, like I said, use PDF is the number one kind of skill there. And another simple one is make sure your email address is simplified, I'll say. So pretty much your name and then @Gmail or whichever. Avoid using email addresses that have, I don't know, newguy@gmail.com. Like they're harder to find if I have to respond to you. Whereas if I look up names and stuff like that, the communication piece just becomes easier. And lastly, one thing I do want to highlight, I'm very myself systems oriented, and typically when you apply for a position with most organizations, you're going to go through what's called an applicant tracking system or an ATS. And essentially what that means is you're going through a computer first. So making sure that you're filling out all of those fields as accurately as possible, which also goes back to why your resume should be in PDF format, because then those systems can read it better and easier. So it's a way to, if you're not getting responses back, that's one reason why, is because either the system itself has filtered you out, or your documents may not be able to be opened on that particular platform. So just a few little activities. They're very simple, and it just it makes the recruiter's life easier, which makes them want to talk to you sooner.
Yeah, make it easy for the person that you want to hire you. That makes sense. Sandy, would you like to throw in some underutilized maybe activities, resources, that kind of thing?
Sure. One thing, and I'm going to follow up about what kind of Blake on his lines too about, when you're applying, I think it's, especially when you're transitioning from, let's say, student to sort of professional as well, be very aware of Instagram and Facebook and what you're posting on there, because employers, I typically will search somebody's name, I'll see what they are on LinkedIn, I'll maybe look at their social media. If you're bashing the federal government, things like that too, stuff like that just doesn't go well when you're applying for a job. So be very kind of cognizant or kind of aware of what you're kind of posting, because you are what you post. And sometimes it's very much, there's a lot of perception kind of around that. So that's just one thing. The other thing too is around, again, too, you're right, when you kind of look to have that awareness around, let's say, a field that you want to be able to get into, whether it's, health and safety or whatever that kind of is, look at industry associations, right? Follow, industry associations to see what sort of current information's out there, stats, be sort of aware of what's going on in your industry so that you can, be informed. And when you're maybe going into the interview process, and you get asked, let's say questions around, let's say networking, or how do you sort of continue to educate yourself around industry standards or things like that. You've got some awareness on that. And then probably the other thing too, when you're looking for jobs too as well, look at mentors, that you've had maybe in your life, and go have a coffee with them, or maybe a virtual meeting now too as well, or a phone call to say, hey, I'm looking for work. What tips and tricks can you sort of provide? What do you like about my sort of personality or background, or since you've known me for 3 years, that stands out? So you just build some more awareness around when you're selling yourself in an interview, what you can kind of focus on or highlight.
Perfect. And I'll throw it to Shannon as well. And I know from personal experience that utilizing career services is definitely something that I think is underutilized, and a really great plug. Yeah. So I'll throw it off to you, Shannon.
You took the words right out of my mouth, Ryan. I was just about to say that that one of the really, it sounds kind of obvious, but one of the best ideas that you can have when it comes to applying for jobs is making sure that you have another set of eyes on your resume and your cover letter. Because when you're, outputting like 10 resumes a week, sometimes you don't necessarily give it the time, and you're tired. So having a friend or a colleague or a family member look over your resume and cover letter can be really helpful. And you can also come and visit Career Services for a virtual appointment, and I can review your resume and your cover letter. It is free for students, and it's available to alumni, whether you're out of school 10 years or 1 year. So please feel free to reach out to Career Services.
So I think Sandy hit on a great point about mentors. What are maybe some advice or your approach to networking and how to build a network? And maybe I'll throw that to Shannon to start us off here.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. I think that networking sometimes can kind of have a bit of a bad reputation. So I think it is really important to actually reframe the concept, especially as a young professional, away from like trying to get something from people towards building relationships. Because at the end of the day, networking is a really great way to build your professional and your social circle with people who are passionate about similar things, who are open to collaboration, and who you can actually build really cool projects with. Like, it's not just you kind of knocking on doors asking for things. I think it's really key for networking to approach it as a way to build genuine connections with people. I know that the people who I've successfully networked with in my life have actually become really great colleagues and mentors, and it isn't necessarily about getting something. The focus really is on helping each other out in a more collaborative environment.
Makes sense. Blake, any thoughts on networking and how you might approach networking?
For sure. I can say for those of you pursuing careers in the HR field, as Sandy said, professional associations are really important. So for HR professionals, CPHR, or the Chartered Professionals of Human Resources organization, is really a great way to get things started. There's also, networking isn't just going to an event and having appetizers, sipping wine, and talking to people. It can be in other ways too, such as volunteering. Again, going to the professional associations, they have a volunteer committee, they have professional ethics, and all these other areas that you can contribute, you can discuss with your peers and colleagues. And it's also a great way to collect a lot of knowledge back to then share with any organization you join, or in an interview when they ask, how would you handle a certain situation that you may not have experience with, you still have a reference point to go from. So those are really great ways too. And then even outside of professional organizations, networking, volunteering in your community is a really big one, because that shows that you're connecting and you're committed to more than just a paycheck at the end of the day. You're looking to contribute more. So I think that's a really even an underutilized activity for networking, for sure.
Great. And Sandy, networking, and I might loop back to the other panelists too, but maybe some advice for COVID and networking, and some thoughts on that. But throw it to you first.
Certainly. I think networking is important probably in any type of role. I mean, the way COVID maybe has changed things, there's a lot of virtual meetings right now too, a lot of virtual happy hours, there's a lot of virtual really good talks that are out there that anybody can join for free. So that's a really good way to really sort of, start to build a bit of your network. What I can kind of do sometimes too as well, which might be something that could be advantageous, is that, let's say if I've been in a meeting, let's say face-to-face pre-COVID, or let's say after COVID, where maybe it's more of a virtual, if somebody's piqued my interest, let's say that I've seen, I write their name down, and then I would go onto LinkedIn afterwards and maybe just send them a quick note to say, hey, it was on the call today too. I really appreciate your comment around this. Would I be able to connect with you to stay, in contact, to share, news or whatnot too as well? Most people always say yes, but that's how you build your network up. In terms of mentors as well, I think it's really important to just be mindful as you go, build your career. And at any stage, doesn't matter if you're, just a new grad or if you're kind of, at the latter part of your career, having people just be mindful. I always think, the 5 people around your, like that center of influence that you kind of have around your sort of life guide you, whether it's personally, professionally, and it could be family members, it could be somebody that you work with, a former boss, anyone like that too. So stay in contact with people. If you have to use them as a reference one point, or let's say you want to talk to them about maybe a job search, and do you think I'm looking to kind of take my MBA, should I, or yes or no, or whatever, people will kind of give you their advice if you build that connection, with them. And like, Shannon said too, it's really about internal and external stakeholders and meeting people and whatnot. Another thing I wrote down is the volunteering. So Blake, you kind of highlighted on that. You'll find as you start to get to a certain point in your career, more at the executive level, that's one thing we always look at. Is somebody on a board? Are you volunteering? Is it more about giving back into the community you work in is really important, and especially more at the executive level for sure. I know sometimes when you're at the point when you're in your, let's say, family years and you're building, you've got kids and whatnot too, and you don't have the time, that's totally understandable. But, you can get connected through the industry associations, or again, too, now with a lot of the different networks that are out there, even meetups, Startup Edmonton, things like that to get involved in, depending what your interests are.
Perfect. I'm going to do a shameless plug. We do have an open executive position on the Alumni Association. So if you are looking for a great networking and volunteer opportunity, shameless plug over. But for Blake and Shannon, is there anything maybe COVID related? I'll give you to add on to what you'd mentioned before. I'll throw it off to you, Blake, if there's anything.
There you go. Yeah, I'll just say that right now COVID is a very interesting time, and kind of piggybacking on Sandy's point of going to those online events is actually, it's very important. And if you are going to follow up with someone on LinkedIn, try to make it as personalized as possible. There's nothing weirder when you have no way of recognizing who's asking to be your contact on LinkedIn. But if you can bring something to their mind of why you want to connect, that's really important. And even on Shannon's point, it's not necessarily about asking for something. It's also, you may have something to contribute for them, or yeah, you may be part of a larger community that can help. So yeah.
Shannon, you can add something about COVID, but I'll also throw the sort of what are your recommendations for getting the most out of social media? Yeah, with relation to job search.
Yeah, so first in relation to COVID-19, I do think Blake and Sandy covered the really key points, but I think something just to keep in mind is that most of the time when you're, whether you're new to an industry or you just graduated, professionals are really usually quite eager to support you. Like, I've been contacted by young professionals interested in career development, and I was just so excited that they even wanted to talk to me about it. So I think sometimes we kind of talk ourselves out of contacting people because we think that we're going to be a nuisance or they're not going to want to talk to us. But most of the time, they'll be really excited to give back to a young professional. And most professionals want to talk about their work if they really enjoy it and if they would be a good mentor for you. And if they are too busy, then usually, one, it has nothing to do with you. They just have a lot going on too. But they might be able to introduce you to someone who might be more well-suited to support you. And in relation to social media, which I do think they're quite closely connected, of course, because you might be using platforms like LinkedIn to connect with these professionals. I think that approaching LinkedIn as a way to learn from other people and gain inspiration for your work, and rather than just kind of passively floating around on LinkedIn without ever commenting or posting anything, trying to use it actively to engage in topical issues in your industry or in the different industries that you're considering can be a really great way to start those conversations and to learn more about the industry itself, which can then help you in both your job search and down the road in interviews as well.
Great points. Sandy, social media and sort of some recommendations around the use there.
Certainly, like I think in terms of, LinkedIn, and I guess we'll use that term again, because LinkedIn really is a business platform. And as anybody in recruiters, executive search, I mean, we've got different sort of platforms like Zoom, and we can kind of chase people down. And that's what we are. We're headhunters, right? We chase people down if we want to be able to, research and find a really good CEO for a company or whatnot, right? But LinkedIn, now you're seeing a lot of people doing hashtag open to work on their pictures. And now people are using that for searches. If you're open to relocate, like again, what you have on your information on your LinkedIn profile, if you have open to new opportunities, right, in your basically your role, because typically let's say your position company, and if you're looking for work right now, be looking for my next opportunity or put something exciting in there, because people will search those terminologies to be able to have you come up. So, I think really LinkedIn's probably the best business platform for looking for work or kind of going on and following companies. Let's say if you've sent a resume into Finning, follow them on Finning, right? You get all their job postings. So, have that sort of connection. Instagram's more, you can get a lot of more like sort of more podcasts and really interesting people to follow, different leaders and whatnot too. So that's a way to see, let's say, what groups are out there. Like there's a lot of like YEG groups that I know I kind of follow as well too, just to see what they're kind of doing and whatnot too. There's even a lot, let's say, used to be the 100-man YEG, right? But there's a lot of even women networking kind of groups as well. And I think as leaders or anybody in the community too, when somebody comes to you to say, hey, I'm looking for some advice, I've always respected you. And you know what? Do you have a couple of minutes? People do want to be able to help you. So, I think the old, reach out to people, kind of ask in terms of that. But social media really is more LinkedIn for sure. Facebook's really more of a personal platform. And I think Twitter's more of a news feed, right? So you're not going to get much value there.
That's fair. Blake, any thoughts on social media and networking usage?
For sure. Yeah, just kind of echoing the same points. LinkedIn should be a reflection of your resume, but at the same time, an expansion of it. So many have heard the rule of thumb of like, if you're applying for a job, try to keep it 2 pages or less, things like that. So you may want to reduce most of your experience down to the core things that'll make you most applicable to the job that you're applying for. But outside of that, you might have experience in other areas and other organizations that can be on your LinkedIn, because that can be more detailed. And like Sandy's saying, having hashtags or other searchable material on there makes a recruiter's life easier, because now they can put you into a search algorithm to find you. Yeah, and absolutely, I would say avoid using Facebook, TikTok, Snapchat, any of those for any kind of recruitment material. However, McDonald's does use Snapchat as a recruitment tool. So some organizations are using it, some are not. So yeah.
Fair. Thursday, Shannon, any advice in terms of decorum on some of the like LinkedIn and that? I know Sandy sort of touched on it, don't be afraid to reach out, but like any sort of really key decorum pieces there, and maybe some of the expectations that might be good to keep in mind.
Yeah, when it comes to LinkedIn, I think it's important to respect other professionals' boundaries. So for instance, if there's an HR professional, and Blake and Sandy might be able to speak to this a bit better, but if there's a professional on LinkedIn, they're using it for their professional development as well quite often. So if you are messaging them in the evenings, like off hours, about a job posting, I would say that's probably not a great first impression. So just be really mindful that people are really busy, and to stay really respectful in all of your interactions with them. while also keeping in mind that it's a professional platform and it is a reflection of your professional self, right? If you want to post something else, then maybe Instagram or Facebook or another more social media platform might be a better fit.
Sandy, any thoughts?
I think Shannon's going to capture that too as well. I think one thing I know I hear from a lot of clients, let's say, that we're working with is if you're, let's say, scheduled for an interview or you've applied for a company, sometimes they don't prefer you prior to interviews reaching out. They will kind of not accept your LinkedIn, or they'll just, you know what, afterwards, I think you've got permission once you've maybe gone for an interview and you've got no other way, if they've not given you a card or whatnot. I think you still have the ability to say, I just wanted to say thank you so much for the time today. I'm really excited about the opportunity to join this company. I hope you don't mind. I want to send you a LinkedIn invite just to be able to thank you. Boom, that's it. So, less is more, but there's ways to do that. I've heard sometimes too, stalking beforehand, companies don't like that, and it can actually be a disadvantage to your search versus an advantage.
Sure. Blake, anything to add? And it just came to my mind, so hopefully it doesn't throw too much of a curveball. But internal too, like any thoughts on decorum? If you're an internal candidate job searching somewhere, on some of those that decorum there.
Yeah, I was just going to say initially with LinkedIn, never use it as a cold call system. So if you have no connection to an individual, don't just send them a connection. Because they're going to reject you out of hand. The profile is for general purposes, but you definitely want to have some reason to be connecting with them. One thing I would suggest with LinkedIn, though, is maybe not connecting with individuals, but if you know who you're going to be interviewing with, use it as a tool to do some research on that individual. I've done that myself in the past, and it's been a great way to understand their perspective on where did they have their specialties in education, what kind of background do they have in their work life. And like I said, LinkedIn is a reflection of your resume. So all that information you would hand to a recruiter, there tends not to be anything too personal on there. I wouldn't go as far as saying research their Facebook or Instagram or cyber stalk them, but a LinkedIn search gives you a general idea of what you're also going into the interview with. In terms of internal candidates, those ones, LinkedIn, you're probably going to connect with them on LinkedIn regardless, just because you do have that personal connection is in the workplace. However, I wouldn't use that as kind of your internal applicant. Like, don't be, like you're saying, harassing the HR person or whoever's doing the interviews with it. Talk to them individually. It's more effective.
Sure. I think we're going to shift gears a little bit here into some advice on job applications. Something that I always struggle with too is, like, if they don't ask for a cover letter, including one, is that something that that you should do, shouldn't do? And if there's anything that's like a common mistake that you might recommend against, and I'll throw that to Shannon first here.
So I'm definitely interested to hear what Blake and Sandy are going to say. Usually when I'm approached with that question, I would encourage the student or alumni to include the cover letter. It's in my view, unless it says, like, do not submit a cover letter. So in my view, it's better to have one and then have them not read it than for them to be expecting one and you to fall short of the other candidates. As far as common mistakes for a cover letter, I believe that they should not just be a grocery list of all the same content that's on your resume. They're an opportunity for you to pick really key strategic experiences that showcase the skills most related to the job that you're applying to and elaborate on it, rather than just saying exactly what's in your resume.
Sandy, thoughts on cover letter? If they don't ask, what does that look like? Resume, some common mistakes.
Sure. Big thing I kind of wrote down, a couple things too, is that, I've seen it happen so much where people have sent me a cover letter and a resume, and the cover letter's got a different role from a previous role that they applied to, and you're like, really? You didn't read it? So make sure when you're looking at your cover letter, it is for the position. And the other thing is typos. Make sure there's no typos. Sometimes people are very picky, and I've seen it where a company has just kind of gone, you know what? No, there's a typo in the resume. I don't like it, and this person doesn't have attention to detail, right? Which is kind of a bit judgmental, but it can happen depending on that. If you're going to put a cover letter in, like I still like cover letters, but just don't do really long cover letters. I think ones that I really like are, you're looking for and have taught, maybe there are 3 or 4 highlighted. I'm looking for, a degree. I'm looking for whatever, you're looking for, I have, right? So you really tie them on a visual. I've seen that kind of in a chart I really like. On the resume, put in your LinkedIn link, right? So they can kind of click on that, see you. And again, that's going to be sort of a reflection of your resume. Like Blake said, your LinkedIn should kind of really follow your business, your resume as well too. So they're really tied in. But I think a cover letter is always, I would put a cover letter in yes over a no. So always go yes, whether they want one or do not. Sometimes when you're uploading them on a applicant tracking software or system, they will not allow you to, but I think I'd rather put one in yes, have it short and sweet, but to the point, and highlight your experience.
Great. Throw that to you now, Blake.
Sure. Like Sandy and Shannon were saying, focus on your achievements and not just your job description, because at the end of the day, any recruiter knows how to Google his job description, but they don't know what you did in that role. So, for example, if you're looking at a finance position, highlight ways that you either grew revenue or decreased costs. And if you can, highlight specific projects that you were involved in. Of course, there's going to be some confidentiality levels to that, but share the information that you can that makes you a unique candidate. Because otherwise, just saying that, or just in the HR world, you were an HR generalist, the title generalist means you did everything. So what did you do that was special? The other one too that I really wanted to highlight is kind of on Sandy's position of tying it to the job description. Use the company's language. So make sure you're reading that job description and whatever words, their language they use in it, use in your cover letter and resume. So for a good example I always use is Apple calls their computer technicians geniuses. Best Buy calls them geeks. And most people will just call them a computer tech. But whatever that language is, try to tie it in. I'll be honest, some of those, I've worked for all those companies and those are very loose terms. So yeah, reflect the language that you're going to be using, because once you get in there, you're going to start learning acronyms and different ways of speaking for all these organizations. So you might as well start learning the new language now.
Great. Interview. So any thoughts on prep for the interview, what that looks like? I'll throw that to Sandy to start us off here.
Wonderful. And I was hoping you were going to ask that because that's a good question. I think for interviews right now, because the first interview usually is going to be on either a Zoom, a Microsoft Teams, Google, some type of a virtual platform. So, make sure, you've tested your camera out, make sure your backdrop is certainly presentable. Don't be afraid. Sometimes too with dogs or kids. I've seen a cat, let's say, go on in front of somebody during the interview. So don't let that startle you at all. But I think you make sure you kind of flush that out. Be professional, right? I always think still, don't have a sweatshirt on during an interview. Again, still be professional, like you would actually sort of meet face to face. They're going to want to see passion. So have passion when you're talking about a role. Seem like you're interested. There's so many times I've seen it before. We've gone through an interview. The client says, I just didn't really get a sense the person really wanted the job, right? So if you're interested, show passion. If you're nervous, don't be afraid to call it out. Say, you know what? I haven't done very many interviews. I'm a bit nervous. I hope you don't mind if you can pick that up. So call it out, right? A lot of behavioral, I kind of look at that STAR methodology, right? So they're going to ask you behavioral questions, right? So in terms of, tell me, what happened in this situation, provide an example. So research the STAR method because it's really providing the context around the situation, the task, the action and the result. They're going to want to see that. And try not to ramble on. Less is more. Sometimes people, they're nervous and they're trying to sort of fit in a lot of information, but try to make sure that listen to the question. They're looking for a response. They're going to want sort of an example of what you actually did in that situation. And have questions for them. Make sure, you have, usually there's like, even this platform, there's 5 or 10 minutes to ask questions. Ask them questions. If you've gone on, like Blake said, into their LinkedIn profiles, why did you join this company? I see you've been here for 8 years. What's the culture like? What does success look like in that position? So have some questions. and make sure you do research the company. That's usually the first question they're going to ask you is, what do you know about the company? What research did you do prior to the interview? And I think the last thing really is follow up with a thank you. If they've given you a business card, they give you permission to send them a thank you note. If not, go on to LinkedIn if you can to say thank you very much. But if you say thank you, it's very professional. It shows that you want the job. It's amazing how many people don't even thank the client after they've met them. And make sure if you can meet them in person, you shake their hand. Maybe their elbow now in the new COVID world, but yeah.
Blake, interview advice.
Yeah, for sure. Very much the same thing. I always say send a thank you card. It's the best kind of way to connect with someone, and that's going to sit on their desk and mean more to them than an email or a LinkedIn message. But very much that kind of thing. But from my experience and what I've seen, the kind of 3 points that you definitely want to know going into an interview are the company itself. So go to their company website. If they have a Wikipedia page, pull it up, because that means that they're either very important or something very bad has happened. So either way, you should know that. Know what their mission, vision, and values are. Those are built typically by like the board level or greater, and they should mean something to those people interviewing you. It's also a great way to reflect the culture. Are they just saying that they have values of trust and respect and things like that, but in the interview they spent half an hour before getting you into the room? That may give you an indicator too of this may not be an organization that you want to align with. So that kind of thing. Lastly, a big one that I from my personal experience, because I've gone into interviews unprepared with this, is know what the lines of business are that you're going to be joining. So I went with an organization where I thought they did one thing, and in the interview, I found out they had 65 different lines of business underneath them, and it was like a whole new world. So those are the kinds of things I would definitely say. Have those 3 points prepared, because the first question will be, why do you want to join our company? What do you know about us? And then after that, they'll get into your experience. So yeah, definitely know that.
Shannon, job interviews.
Yeah, first off, Sandy and Blake, thank you so much. Those were both really great answers. I know I'm taking notes here for things to tell students in the future. I think that when it comes to interviews, it's really important, especially if you're a bit anxious or you're nervous, to approach it as a conversation, and that knowing, just like Blake said, that this is an opportunity for you to learn about, is this company going to be a good fit for you as well? So one of the ways to approach an interview with this mindset is to really practice telling your professional story, especially around key examples that you're hoping to bring in to respond to those behavioral questions, like Sandy mentioned, using STAR. So by practicing telling your story, you can make it more concise, really identify the key skills and situations that you want to highlight during the interview. So then when the interview is over, you know that at least you shared the really key points prior to the end of the interview.
We're about 10 minutes to the end, so I'm going to start winding it down. I have one that's my favorite question, so I'm going to tie that in with our final question too, because I'm a bit selfish sometimes. So one is, like, what is your advice around answering the salary expectations question? I think this is always a really hard one for everybody, even if you've done a Glassdoor search or if you've, all of those things. It's always a tough question. So I'd love to hear your answer on how to answer the salary expectations, or some advice around that. And then also the second part is, if you had to tell everyone here, the students and alumni, one thing to keep in mind for their job search, what would that one thing be, that key takeaway? So we'll start with Sandy here.
Thank you. So I think around that salary question, so we get that all the time, right? And I think clients want to know that you've got the confidence to be able to say what salary you're looking for. So, look at pay scale, look and make sure, let's say if the role is 50 to 70, or maybe you don't know and you're looking for, if you've got no experience, it's one thing, but I would be you need to be confident and know that you kind of know what that sort of role should entail. So I would be saying, I'm looking for, let's say 55K, but I'm really open based on this opportunity because I really want to join this company. I think there's a real growth and career here for me, but don't be afraid. They're looking for you to have the confidence to be able to provide a number. A lot of times if somebody says, I don't really know, or whatever your salary range is, the company is, I mean, it's gracious, but I think they want to know you've got the confidence that you're going to say, I'm worth this. In terms of leaving points, I guess the final note on your job search is remember that you're interviewing them as much as they are interviewing you, right? So it can get frustrating, make sure that, keep the list, like Blake has sort of said too, in terms of where you're applying, try to do as much as you kind of can, but keep the mental health also there too. So if you get frustrated, stop for a day, go for a run, get a break, do something like that, because I think in the world of virtual applying and the way we are right now with virtual meetings and all of that, sometimes you can get lost. Sometimes it's not about a qualification or fit. And it just can be very frustrating based on sort of, the job search. So really approach it as a bit of a scavenger hunt. So stay positive, take breaks when you kind of need to, but look at it like a marathon, right? Make sure that you've got sort of that, the energy, the resources to be able to go forth and find that job that's going to be your dream job.
Perfect. Thank you, Sandy. Blake, salary expectations and key takeaway.
For sure. With salary expectations, definitely, this comes back to the interview prep. Make sure you've done your research. Know the industry that you're applying into, know the location that you're applying into, and then also your personal skill level as well as years of experience. All of those play major factors. And as Sandy was saying, go in with confidence, knowing, give yourself a range. So 55 to 60,000. I always say, assume you're going to get offered, 5% less than what your range is. So in your mind, you have a larger range than what you're stating it is. And then that way, when they do offer less, you're still within your acceptable range. So that's number one. But of course, know what you're worth and be willing to say, no, this won't work for me. Because the other side of things is I've seen individuals start work with an organization and within a month or two are now asking for pay increases because this wasn't what they were expecting. And that typically doesn't go over well kind of on the back end side of things. So yeah, knowing your worth for sure. In terms of how COVID and how everything has impacted the game, and one thing to take away, persistence is key. If you can do one thing for yourself every day that moves your career forward, that's better than nothing at all. And it's a big way. So if you don't have any jobs to apply to today, take a look at your resume, review it, make sure it's up to date, see if there's any language changes. Are there other things that you can include that would make you a more marketable candidate? Something small like that, even if you have someone, a friend or a mentor or an ex-colleague, review your resume or cover letters, even having a conversation with them, that one small thing each day can really build to something greater. So, but like I said, persistence is key. Myself in the last months, I sent out 85 resumes, had 14 interviews, and was apparently second place in 13 of them. So it's you're going to get some rejection, and it's just part of the game.
Thanks, Blake. Shannon, bring us home here with salary expectations and a key takeaway.
Thanks, Ryan. I don't actually have anything else to add to salary expectations. I think Sandy and Blake covered it really well with knowing your value, doing your research, and approaching the interaction with confidence. I think that basically covers it. And, it gets easier with practice. The first time that you have to say your salary expectations is probably going to be tough, but it only goes up from there, really. When it comes to the key takeaway, I think that's really important for job seekers to really focus on what you can actually control. You can't really control if they hire you. You can't really control if you get laid off. What you can control is your resume and your cover letter, making sure you're changing it for every job that you apply to. You can control your professional relationship management through networking and getting involved with professional associations and industry associations. So by focusing on what you can control, I find that can really help your mental health in job search, because you're an active part of your job search rather than just, receiving rejections or just having to get a job. So really making sure that you're approaching your job search with confidence and knowing the value that you could bring to an organization.
Perfect. Okay, so I'm just going to post something in the chat, which is our Renewable Energy Speaker Series link. And then I'm going to open it up. If any of the participants had a question, I think we might have time for one, maybe two questions. Maybe, I think the chat is open. I'm sorry, I'm not. Yeah, perfect. So if anyone had a question that they would like us to throw out to our panelists, feel free to throw that in chat. I'll give a moment or two for that to happen. And while that's going, I just want to say I really do appreciate Sandy, Blake, and Shannon taking time out of their evening to come speak to us today. I think this has been great. I've learned a lot. I wrote a bunch of notes here and have some things to change around on my resume and a few things. So I'm really excited about that. So great question to ask for the question. So I'll throw this to maybe Blake first. What is an expected answer for the question? Do you have any questions for us? Or maybe what are they looking for? What's the purpose there?
The number one question I say that should be kind of top of your list when you're coming back to that is, what does success look like for someone in this role? Because when you're applying for a job, you have an image in your head of what you're going into, and you may come from another position or something similar from another organization. But again, titles are very subjective. What a human resources generalist does at one company means something completely different somewhere else. So for them, success could look like you achieving certain results within a certain time. Sometimes they might just say, hey, if you know people's names and can operate our system in time, that's going to look great in 3 months. It also gives you something, if you do land the job, something to work towards. And so that way you can feedback at 3 months, 6 months, a year, and be like, here's what we discussed in our interview. Here's what I've achieved now. And here's what my next goals are. So that's my number one question. The other one I always kind of include, and it's a little bit of a blowing smoke question, is what can I do in this role that makes your life easier? Typically, the hiring manager interviewing you is someone that you're either going to be working with, either in the organization or directly for. And the reason that they're looking for the position is to alleviate some tension that they have in their job. Either they need someone to help with administrative work or take on additional caseloads or other things like that. So it also gives you an expectation of where their priorities are, so you know what to expect from them when you do take on that job.
Perfect. Thanks, Blake. I'll throw that to Sandy about answering the question. Do you have any questions for us?
So what I think too as well is that I kind of say the same thing like Blake. That's a good one. What does success look like in this position? Again, why are you with the organization? What made you join? I like that kind of question too as well. What does sort of the day in the life of this role look like? Another good question to be able to ask, right? 3 months from now, or let's say 6 months from now, what would you like to see achieved if I were to step into this role, right? And maybe the last one is are there any skill sets that you feel I do not have that would prevent you from hiring me?
Those are great. I think it comes back to an interview is also a time for you to interview the company a little bit too. That was talked about a little bit earlier. Shannon, do you have anything to add do you have any questions for us?
Yeah, I definitely agree with what Blake and Sandy suggested. I think it's really important too that you've done your research on the company, because you don't want to ask a question that the answer to is on the public website. So for example, if it's a smaller organization and you ask what opportunities are there for advancement, and it's only the person who's interviewing you's role is the only opportunity for advancement, maybe avoid that question, because you should have found that out on the company website. So research is really key.
Perfect. I'll give our panelists a chance. We do have 2 more questions, but we are at 6:30. So if you need to hop off, feel free to hop off. Otherwise, if you wanted to stay on and
I'm good.
sure. maybe I'll throw this to Shannon first. Do you have any advice in regards to juggling multiple job interviews and/or offers?
Yeah, I'm actually really excited to hear Blake and Sandy's answers to that one as well. I think that can be a really tough situation sometimes if you have multiple offers or you have one offer and you're waiting for an offer from another company. My general advice for that situation would be that most of the time it's okay to ask for a little bit of time to think about it. Ask, can I have 24 hours just to consider this? I'm really excited about the opportunity. Thank you so much. I just want to check in with my family, do my due diligence before I accept this. That can buy you a little bit more time.
Sure. Blake, thoughts on juggling offers and interviews?
For sure. For one, know that when you're signing an employment contract, it's a legal contract. So you do have to have a consideration period in there, which means typically that you should be given time to review it. And if you've had multiple interviews and within the same week you're going to get different offers, take the time that you need. The other big one I say is, because it's a contract, do not sign it unless you've read the entire contract. There are going to be lines in there that you may not understand, that you want clarification on. And there are parts that you may even want to negotiate. For example, vacation. It's fairly flexible on that piece. Salary might be a little bit tougher once you've made what your expectations are and they come back with. But I've seen a lot of movement on, they say 2 weeks to start, you ask for 3, and they're like, great, let's do it. But definitely read through that contract before you're understanding it. The only other piece I would say too with multiple offers, do not use them against each other. So don't say, I've applied here, you're offering me this, I just got an offer here for this amount. To be quite honest, HR people working in organizations can be a little bit hurt by that, and they may simply then pull the offer on you. So just don't try to weaponize it, is what I'm saying.
Sandy, thoughts on juggling offers and interviews?
I think being organized for one, know where your passion is as well. So if you've got multiple offers, multiple interviews, know what your job is. Scale 1 to 10, where's your highest? Because I think that's really important. But I also use a bit of transparency. Let's say if I've been given an offer by somebody as well, and I'm interviewing, usually they would have known, are you interviewing with somebody else or another client or whatever. But I guess I'm on more the candidate side when I'm dealing with clients. I'll say, kind of, where are you in your interview stage? Never kind of push a company. But if I've got to say to a company, you know what, Blake's got another offer, he's interested with another client, just so you know. So if you're interested in him, don't stall, like what steps we need to make sure maybe by Friday he's got an offer. So I think there's some value in being a bit transparent, but not using it against each other. But, and for a candidate, let's say if you're looking to as well, if you do have another offer, but again, this is company A that is, the perfect, most give you 24 hours, 48 hours, or they should give you a couple of days grace for, a time to be able to talk with your family. But if there is another offer or a company you want an offer from, you have the opportunity to say, you know what, company A, I'd love to be able to work for you. I have received another offer, and will I expect an offer, just so you kind of know, not to use it against you, but just say that too as well. So the transparency piece is big.
Perfect. And then the last question was, I found it interesting when Sandy mentioned putting a chart on your cover letter. Did you want to give maybe a little bit of some color on that?
Sure. I think it's more of a visual. So usually you kind of have your opening paragraph, but again, just saying, you know what, why should you hire me? A, you're looking for these 5 things. And then basically in the other column beside it says, I have these things, right? So it's just more of a visual. It stands out versus having it lost in the paragraph summary.
It's kind of like a quick recap of, hey, look, bam, 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 easy for them to see.
Yeah, you're looking for, I have, yeah.
One thing I do want to add to that as well, when it comes to interview prep and things like that, build yourself a portfolio of items that you can bring to the interview. I find that very, very useful. So any past projects that you can share, anything that, like, bring your tablet or laptop to an interview and ask if you can show these kinds of things, because that'll be a great way to separate yourself from other candidates. Which, same with with a chart on your cover letter, that's going to make it easier to read. I think the current statistics are that average recruiters look at a resume or cover letters like 2 to 3 seconds. So don't have fancy formats and fonts. get the data out as fast as you can.
Great. I'll throw it just to like final comments. I don't know, Shannon, if you want to talk about any of those pieces, but we'll start with Shannon maybe for any final comments or pieces.
Yeah, I think that throughout, especially your resume, your cover letter, interview process, it's also really important to incorporate really positive language. So for example, if you're asked a question in your interview about if you've had, how you manage a conflict in your past workplace, you probably don't want to start, bad mouthing your past boss or your past coworkers. You can state what the conflict was, but do so in a way where you're not throwing anyone under the bus, because you are also talking to your future boss and your future coworkers. So just trying to integrate positive language at all stages of the job application process can be really important to give a good first impression.
Sandy, any final thoughts, comments?
I just think to support your search as well, I think it's important to reach out to different professional staffing or executive search firms when you are looking. Again, they can't guarantee, but we're here to support your search. Different firms may have different clients, some of the same, but I mean, it's nice having a relationship with a recruiter where even from an interview prep, I've got people that say that will phone me and say, Sandy, I've got an interview with this company, I kind of found the role on my own. Like, we provide a lot of free advice and whatnot too as well. So I'll even say, you know what? Hey, we can even do a mock interview set up, something like that too. So there's a lot of support we can provide people looking in the marketplace as well.
Perfect. And Blake, final thoughts, comments?
For sure. I think going with Sandy, yeah, or firms like that, as well as like understanding that not all jobs that are out there are posted online. There's a large component that you'll see for getting from networking, or, hey, I think I have a position in my organization that you'd be great for. We haven't posted it yet because the person is still in the role, or they're looking for some way to build a pipeline. So making sure that you're connecting with your network, mentors, all that kind of stuff is very important. And then using any resource that's out there. Never pigeonhole yourself by using only LinkedIn or only Indeed. Like, use all those websites. You'll see a lot of reposts and stuff like that. So don't apply to the same job twice. But even like, people don't give it enough credit, but the Canada Job Bank does have positions on there as well. Don't be afraid to apply them there too.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone. I just want to remind everyone, students, alumni, that we have a fantastic career services options available, and to reach out to Shannon to get some of that service. Personally, I've been benefiting hugely for using career services, so I would 100% recommend it. But thank you so much to our panelists and taking the time to speak to everyone today. And yeah, have a great night, everybody, and just thank you for